Fridley woke up to the sound of sirens from the fire station on 61st Avenue. The town of 28,000 residents, located 20 minutes from Minneapolis, lived a quiet suburban life. Everyone knew their neighbors, local police patrolled familiar streets, and high school seniors dreamed of either moving to the big city or staying and continuing family traditions. Jason Taylor woke up at 6 in the morning in his room in a one-story house on 64th Avenue. The 17-year-old automatically reached for his alarm clock, even though his internal clock was already accustomed to early rising. After school, he had a shift at Cub Foods, the local supermarket where he had been working as a stocker for a year and a half. He desperately needed the money. His mother, Linda, worked as a cashier at the same store, but their two salaries were barely enough to cover rent and groceries. Linda was already sitting in the kitchen with a cup of coffee and a shopping list. At 42, she looked older. Constant financial worries and raising her son alone had taken their toll. The divorce from Jason's father had been painful, and since then she had tried to be both mother and father at the same time. "I'll be late tonight," Jason said, pouring himself some juice. "The manager asked me to help with a big delivery." Linda nodded. She was proud of her son. Despite all the difficulties, Jason was responsible and never caused any trouble. He was a good student, worked hard, and had a wonderful girlfriend from a good family. At the same time, on the other side of town, in a house on Main Street, Madison Clark was waking up. The two-story colonial house with a neat lawn and 2 cars in the garage spoke of the family's prosperity. At 18, Madison was a model student, president of the student council, captain of the debate team, and a volunteer at the local library. In the fall, she was headed to the University of Minnesota, where she planned to study law. At breakfast, her father, District Attorney Robert Clark, was reviewing the morning reports. A man in a strict suit with graying temples and a confident gaze, he was one of the most influential figures in Anoka County. His career was on the rise. There was talk of a possible candidacy for state attorney general. "Dad, can I take the car today? I want to visit Jason at work," said Madison, stirring her fruit yogurt. Robert looked up from his newspaper. He wasn't too happy about his daughter's relationship with a boy from a working-class family, but he tried not to interfere. Madison was old enough and sensible enough to make her own decisions. Just be careful, especially at night. There have been a lot of car break-ins at the mall lately. At that moment, Officer Rick Hansen was getting ready for his day shift at the Fridley police station. A 35-year-old veteran with 12 years of experience, he had a reputation as a tough cop. His colleagues knew about his quick temper and tendency to use excessive force, but there were relatively few official complaints. Most citizens preferred not to get involved with the police. After his divorce 2 years ago, Hansen lived alone in an apartment on the outskirts of town. Alcohol became his constant companion, although he tried to keep it under control while on duty. His partner, Brad Cole, repeatedly tried to talk to him about his problems, but Hansen dismissed any attempts at intervention. The morning briefing at the station was standard. Captain David Wright, who had been in charge of the department for the past 5 years, read out the incident report and gave instructions for the day. Several thefts, 2 domestic disputes, 1 case of vandalism in the park, business as usual for a city of this size. "Hansen, Cole, you take the North District. Pay special attention to the shopping center and school zone," ordered the captain. At Fridley High School, Jason's day was proceeding as usual. Math, history, and English classes followed one another in their usual rhythm. At lunch, he met Madison, and they discussed their plans for the weekend. Their relationship had been going on for 8 months, and despite the difference in their social status, their feelings were sincere and deep. "My parents want to invite you to dinner this weekend," Madison said as they sat in the school cafeteria. Jason was a little embarrassed. Visits to the Clark's house always made him nervous. He felt the difference in wealth and education, even though Madison and her mother tried not to emphasize it. After school, Jason went to work. Cub Foods was one of the main employers in town, and many local teenagers worked there after school. Manager Tom Anderson valued Jason for his punctuality and hard work. "Jace, we have a big shipment of canned goods coming in today. I think we'll be done by 9, Tom said, as Jason changed into his work clothes. The work was physically demanding, but Jason didn't complain. Every dollar he earned was important to his family, and he dreamed of saving up for college. Madison often offered to help with money, but his pride prevented him from accepting handouts, even from the girl he loved. Meanwhile, Hansen and Cole were patrolling the northern part of town. It was a quiet day, a few speeding tickets, one call about noisy neighbors. But Hansen was in a gloomy mood. The night before, he had drunk more than usual again, and now his headache was making itself felt. "Maybe you should take a sick day," Cole suggested, noticing his partner's condition. "I'm fine," Hansen snapped. "Just drive." By evening, the Northtown Mall was bustling. Teenagers gathered around the fountain, families with children finished their shopping, and store employees prepared to close. It was here, in a few hours, that a meeting would take place that would change the lives of everyone involved in this story. Detective Sarah Morgan was finishing her day at the station, reviewing robbery cases. An experienced investigator with 20 years on the force, she had recently transferred to Fridley from the Minneapolis department, tired of the big city and its problems. Here, life seemed calmer and more predictable. She did not yet know that she would soon be investigating one of the most difficult and painful cases of her career. The clock read 9:15 p.m. when Jason Taylor finally finished unloading the last boxes of canned goods in the Cub Foods warehouse. His t-shirt was stuck to his back with sweat. The work had been harder than usual. Tom Anderson, the manager, had gone home an hour ago, leaving Jason to finish up alone. Changing into his regular clothes, jeans and a sweatshirt with the Fridley High School logo, Jason exited through the service entrance. The Northtown Mall parking lot was nearly empty. A few cars near the 24-hour pharmacy, a couple of teenagers on skateboards by the fountain, nothing out of the ordinary. His old 2008 Honda Civic was parked under a streetlight in the far corner of the parking lot where the store employees parked. Jason took out his phone and texted Madison, "Finished. Heading home. See you tomorrow at school." The reply came almost instantly. "Be careful. Love you." He smiled as he got into the car. Despite his fatigue, thoughts of Madison always lifted his spirits. Tomorrow was Friday, which meant they would be able to spend the whole weekend together. At that moment, patrol car number 23 of the Fridley Police Department was slowly driving down 73rd Avenue. Officer Brad Cole was behind the wheel, and his partner, Rick Hansen, was dozing next to him. Their shift was ending in 40 minutes, and both were tired from a long day. "Rick, how about we stop for coffee?" Cole suggested, slowing down at a traffic light. Hansen opened his eyes and rubbed his face with his hands. His headache hadn't gone away, and his mood was getting worse. That morning, he had received a letter from his ex-wife's lawyer demanding an increase in alimony. He was already short on cash, and now he had these financial problems on top of everything else. "We'd better drive past the mall again. There have been too many car thefts lately," he grumbled. Cole nodded and turned toward Northtown. Indeed, there had been 5 car thefts reported in the last month, all in the vicinity of shopping malls. Captain Wright demanded increased patrols. Jason pulled out of the parking lot and headed for the mall exit. The music in his headphones helped him relax after a hard day. He thought about how he would have to do his math homework and prepare for his history test tomorrow, and his mom needed help with the shopping. The patrol car appeared in his rearview mirror as he turned onto 73rd Avenue. Jason automatically checked his speed, 35 miles per hour, exactly the limit. He had always been a careful driver, especially when the police were around. "That Honda over there," Hansen said suddenly, pointing to Jason's car. "The license plate is obscured by dirt." Cole looked closely. The license plate was indeed dusty, but it was perfectly legible. "It's fine, Rick. The guy's driving by the rules," but Hansen had already turned on his flashing lights. "Stop him. We'll check his documents." Cole reluctantly signaled to pull over. Deep down, he knew his partner was just looking for a reason to pick a fight. This had been happening more and more often in recent months. Jason saw the flashing lights and felt his heart skip a beat. He never broke the rules, but encounters with the police always made him nervous. He turned on his hazard lights and smoothly pulled over to the side of the road near the Super America gas station. Hansen got out of the patrol car first, without waiting for Cole. His gait was tense and aggressive. 12 years of service had given him the habit of dominating any situation, and his bad mood only reinforced his natural aggressiveness. "Documents," he demanded, approaching the driver's window. Jason politely handed over his license and insurance. "Good evening, officer." "Have I done something wrong?" "What do you think?" Hansen snapped, studying the documents. "Jason Taylor, 17 years old. What are you doing out so late?" "I was working at the supermarket. Now I'm going home." Cole moved closer, sensing the growing tension. He saw the change in his partner's expression, and it worried him. "Rick, the papers are fine. Maybe we should let the kid go." But Hansen didn't seem to hear him. He stared intently at Jason, and there was something sinister in his eyes. "Get out of the car," he ordered. "But I haven't done anything wrong," Jason said in surprise. "I said get out." Jason slowly got out of the car, keeping his hands in plain sight. He could hear his heart pounding. Something was wrong, but he didn't understand what. "Rick, calm down," Cole said quietly. "The guy's clean." Hansen turned to his partner with rage in his eyes. "Don't tell me how to do my job. See how nervous he is? He's obviously hiding something." "Officer, I just want to go home," Jason said, trying to remain calm. "My mom gets worried when I'm late." "Mommy's worried?" Hansen sneered. "Where's Daddy?" "In jail?" Jason clenched his fists, but said nothing. Any mention of his father was always painful, but he knew that any reaction would only make the situation worse. "Turn around, hands on the car," Hansen commanded. "For what?" "I didn't do anything." "For disobeying a police officer." Hansen roughly turned Jason around and pressed him against the hood of the car. The search was humiliating and clearly excessive. Cole stood nearby, unsure how to stop his partner without creating even more problems. "Rick, that's enough. There's nothing suspicious here." "What's this?" Hansen pulled a small folding knife from Jason's pocket, a common tool the guy used at work to open boxes. "It's a work knife," Jason explained. "I work as a loader. I need it for—" "Shut up!" Hansen barked. "A cold weapon. Cole, see? He was armed. It's just a regular pocket knife, Rick." Not a weapon, but Hansen was already beside himself. Accumulated anger, alcohol withdrawal, financial problems, all merged into a wave of rage that crashed down on the defenseless teenager. "Hands behind your back. You're under arrest." "For what?" Jason tried to turn around, and that was a fatal mistake. Hansen interpreted the movement as resistance to arrest. His hand with the baton flew up and came down hard on the teenager's shoulder. Jason screamed in pain and tried to defend himself, which only enraged the officer even more. "Resisting arrest!" Hansen yelled, continuing to beat him. Cole rushed forward, trying to stop his partner, but it was too late. Hansen, having lost all control, struck blow after blow. Jason fell to the asphalt, covering his head with his hands, but the beating continued. "Rick, stop! You're going to kill him." Only Cole's physical intervention forced Hansen to stop. The officer stood over the motionless body of the teenager, breathing heavily, with a bloodied baton in his hand. Jason lay on the asphalt, his face covered in blood, his left arm twisted unnaturally. Consciousness came and went in waves of pain. "God, what have you done?" Cole whispered as he called for an ambulance. Witnesses gathered at the gas station. Someone was filming the incident on their phone. Cole knew that both their careers were over, but right now, the most important thing was to save the boy's life. The ambulance arrived in 7 minutes. The paramedics quickly assessed Jason's condition: concussion, broken arm, multiple bruises, and abrasions. His condition was serious, but not critical. At Fridley Hospital, the doctor on duty, Dr. Emily Chen, examined the patient. and gasped. In her 20 years of working in trauma, she had seen a lot, but the signs of such a brutal beating of a 17-year-old teenager shocked even her. "Who did this?" she asked the accompanying officer. "The police." Officially resisting arrest, Cole replied reluctantly. Dr. Chen shook her head. No amount of resistance could justify such injuries. The call to Linda Taylor came at 11:30 p.m. The voice on the line was official, emotionless. "Your son is in the hospital. An incident with the police. Come immediately." Linda rushed to the hospital 20 minutes later, still wearing her cashier's uniform. What she saw in the intensive care unit caused her to fall to her knees beside her son's bed. Jason's face was almost unrecognizable from the swelling and bruising. His left arm was in a cast, and he was hooked up to IVs and monitors. Her quiet, responsible boy who had never hurt anyone. "What happened to him?" she whispered, stroking her son's uninjured arm. The nurse on duty told her about his admission. The official version was, "Injuries sustained while apprehending a suspect." In the morning, the news reached Madison. A call from her friend Sarah woke her up at 7 a.m. "Maddie, have you seen the news? Your Jason was beaten up by the police." Madison initially thought it was some kind of mistake. Jason had never broken the law. He even crossed the street only when the light was green. But when she saw footage from the scene on the local news, when she saw the bloodied young man being loaded into the ambulance, reality hit her with full force. She rushed to the hospital without telling her parents. In the ward, Jason was conscious but had difficulty speaking because of his broken lips. "Maddie," he whispered when he saw her. "I'm sorry I scared you." Madison took his good hand, trying not to cry. "Why did they do this to you?" "What happened?" Jason told her what he could. A routine stop, a check of his documents, and then everything went wrong. One of the officers seemed to have gone crazy. "What was his name?" Madison asked quietly. "Hansen. Officer Hansen." Madison would remember that name forever. Robert Clark learned about the incident from Captain Wright, who called him at home. As district attorney, he had to be aware of all serious incidents involving the police. "Bob, we have a problem. Hansen went too far with a teenager. There's video footage, witnesses. The media is already involved." Robert felt his stomach clench. A political career required caution in such sensitive matters. And when he learned the name of the victim, the situation became even more complicated. "He's the boy my daughter is dating," he told the captain. There was a long pause. "Damn, Bob." That changes things. On Monday morning, the entire Fridley High School was talking about one thing. The video of Jason Taylor being beaten by a police officer spread across social media like wildfire. The hashtag Justice for Jason became a trending topic in Minnesota. Madison sat in an empty classroom, unable to concentrate on her lessons. Only one thought ran through her head. The man entrusted with protecting citizens had turned into an animal and maimed her beloved, and that should not go unpunished. A week had passed since the beating, and Jason Taylor was still in the hospital in Fridley. Doctors were concerned about possible complications from the concussion. The teenager was experiencing bouts of nausea and dizziness that would not go away. His left arm was broken in 2 places and required complex surgery with metal plates. Linda Taylor hardly left her son's bedside. She took unpaid leave from her job at the supermarket, which meant a complete loss of income for the family. Medical bills had already exceeded $30,000, and insurance covered only part of the costs. Each day in the hospital added another $2,000 to the debt. "Mom, maybe they'll let me out tomorrow?" Jason asked weakly, watching his mother count the money in her wallet. "Don't think about that, son. The most important thing is your health," Linda replied, but her heart ached with despair. She already knew she would have to take out a loan against the house. Madison came every day after school. She brought her homework, trying to maintain the appearance of normality, but inside she was seething with rage. Every bruise on Jason's face, every painful groan he made, echoed in her soul with a thirst for justice. Dad has to do something, she told her mother over dinner the day after the incident. Robert Clark put down his fork and sighed heavily. The last few days had been a real nightmare for him. The media demanded comments, public organizations called for an investigation, and his political advisors warned of possible damage to his career. Meaty, do you understand the position I'm in? I can't personally handle this case. Why? You're a prosecutor. Your job is to seek justice. That's exactly why I have to step aside. The conflict of interest is obvious. Madison stood up from the table, her eyes burning with anger. So your career is more important than justice? More important than some lunatic in uniform maiming an innocent guy? Madison! Her mother called out sternly. No, Mom! It's not right. If we can't get justice when someone close to us is hurt, what kind of system is this? Robert watched his daughter as she ran out of the dining room. Deep down, he knew she was right, but 20 years in politics had taught him to be cautious. The Hansen case could ruin his plans to become state attorney general. The next day, Madison came to her father's office in the district attorney's building. Robert Clark received visitors in a spacious office on the 4th floor, decorated with diplomas and photographs with influential politicians. Dad, I want to know what's going on with Jason's case. Robert pointed his daughter to a chair across from his desk. The case has been assigned to Assistant District Attorney Michael Stevens. He's an experienced lawyer. What does the police say? Has Hansen been suspended? He's been temporarily suspended from patrol duty. An internal investigation is underway. Madison felt her blood boil. Temporarily suspended? He almost killed a man. He should be in jail. Maddie, you have to understand, everything has to be done according to the law. We need to gather evidence, interview witnesses. There's video footage. What else do you need? Robert stood up and walked to the window. Beyond the glass were the rooftops of Fridley, a quiet town he had represented in court for many years. The video doesn't show everything. Hansen claims Jason resisted arrest. That's a lie. Maybe. But that has to be proven in court. Meanwhile, at the police station, Captain David Wright called an emergency meeting. Public pressure was mounting every day, with more than 1 million people having viewed the video of the beating, and activists demanding the resignation of the department's leadership. Gentlemen, we need to act quickly and decisively, Wright said, looking around at the officers present. This incident could destroy the reputation of the entire department. Detective Sarah Morgan sat in the corner of the conference room, listening intently. Her transfer from Minneapolis to quiet Fridley now seemed like a fatal mistake. She had seen cases like this before and knew how they usually ended. One of the junior officers would be made the scapegoat, and the real problems would remain unresolved. What did the internal investigation reveal? She asked. Captain Wright looked at the papers in front of him. Officer Hansen exceeded his authority during the arrest. Disciplinary action and additional training in citizen interaction are recommended. Disciplinary action? Morgan couldn't believe it. For nearly killing a teenager? Detective, the situation is complicated. Hansen claims the suspect resisted. I saw the video. There was no resistance. An awkward silence ensued. Everyone knew Morgan was right, but no one wanted to go against the system. Officer Brad Cole, Hansen's partner and the only witness to the beating, sat at the end of the table with a grim expression. The last week had been hell for him. His conscience tormented him for not stopping his partner in time. Cole, your testimony is extremely important, Wright said. What exactly did you see? Brad slowly looked up. The room was completely silent. The guy didn't resist. Rick just lost it. The captain grimaced. Such testimony complicated Hansen's defense. Are you sure? Maybe you missed something in the dark? Cole understood the hint, but shook his head. No, sir. Everything was clearly visible. The lighting was normal. After the meeting, Sergeant Tommy Miller, a 20-year veteran of the department, approached Cole. Brad, do you realize what you're doing? If Hansen goes down, it'll hit us all. The public will decide we're all like that. What am I supposed to do? Lie under oath? Don't lie. Just don't jump to conclusions. Maybe you don't remember everything exactly. Adrenaline, stress. Cole shook his head silently and left. His wife and 2 small children were waiting for him at home. He knew that telling the truth could cost him his job in a small town where everyone knew each other. A week after the incident, Madison met with Assistant District Attorney Michael Stevens. The middle-aged man with tired eyes received her in his modest office, littered with case files. "Miss Clark, I understand your concern, but I must warn you, this case is not as simple as it seems." "Not simple?" "There's video footage, there are witnesses. There's also Officer Hansen's statement that Mr. Taylor resisted arrest and was armed with a knife." Madison couldn't believe her ears. Armed? It's a work tool. And there was no resistance. Maybe, but that has to be proven. For now, we only have the word of a teenager against the word of a police officer. What about the video? The video doesn't show everything. Hansen can claim he acted in self-defense. Madison left the prosecutor's office in complete confusion. The system she had believed in all her life, the system her father had worked for, turned out to be a cynical machine that protected its own. At home, a phone call from Linda Taylor was waiting for her. "Madison, dear, I got a call from someone at the police union. They're offering to settle the case amicably. He says that if we don't go to court, they'll help with the medical expenses." "How much are they offering?" $50,000. That will cover the treatment and still have some left over. Madison gripped the phone tightly. $50,000 to turn a blind eye to police brutality, to let Hansen go unpunished. What did Jason say? He agrees. He says he doesn't want any more trouble. He just wants to forget. That evening, Madison visited Jason in the hospital. The teenager looked better. The swelling had gone down, the bruises had faded, but his eyes showed fatigue and a desire to end it all. "Do you really want to take the money and forget about it?" she asked. Jason nodded. "Marty, I just want to get back to normal life. My mom needs money for treatment." "What about justice?" "What justice? You see how things work. They protect their own." Madison took his hand. "So Hansen will remain free? He'll continue to beat people up?" "I don't know, Maddie. I can't fight this anymore." Madison didn't sleep a wink that night. She lay in bed thinking about justice, about the system that had betrayed them, about Hansen walking free. In the morning, the news came. The Taylor family had agreed to a settlement. There would be no official investigation. Hansen would receive a reprimand and undergo retraining. Everyone at school was talking about it. Activists called it a betrayal. Conservatives called it a reasonable decision. But Madison listened to the conversations as if through cotton wool. After class, she drove to Hansen's house. The address was easy to find. In a small town, everyone knows each other. A 2-story house on the outskirts of town, an unkempt lawn, an old pickup truck in the driveway. Madison parked across the street and watched. Around 6 in the evening, Hansen came out of the house and headed for his car. He looked normal. No signs of remorse or shame. Just a middle-aged man going about his business. When he drove away, the thought that had been maturing in Madison's mind all week finally took shape. The system had failed them. The law had failed. There would be no justice. That meant she would have to take justice into her own hands. That evening, she sat down at her computer and began researching Officer Rick Hansen, where he lived, where he worked, his daily routine, social media, public records, everything she could find online. Madison Clark, an honors student and future law student, the daughter of a prosecutor who had believed in law and order her whole life, was making the most important decision of her life. If the system wouldn't punish Hansen, she would. The plan took shape gradually over the next 2 weeks. Madison studied Hansen's daily routine, his habits, his weaknesses. She learned that he lived alone after his divorce, that he had a drinking problem, that he often stayed late at work. The most difficult part was getting a gun. Minnesota has fairly strict gun laws, but her father had a safe with a service weapon in his house. Madison knew the code, her mother's date of birth, which her father had never changed. Even more difficult was dealing with her moral doubts. Murder is not just a violation of the law, it is crossing a line from which there is no turning back. But every time she saw Jason with his arm in a cast, every time she heard him wake up at night from nightmares, her doubts receded. Tuesday, October 23rd, 11:47 p.m. Rain pounded on the roof of the one-story house on Fillmore Street, where Officer Rick Hansen was spending another lonely evening. The TV was showing reruns of sports news, and a half-empty bottle of Jack Daniel's whiskey sat on the coffee table. Hansen lay on the couch in his home clothes, old jeans and a t-shirt with the Harley-Davidson logo. The last 3 weeks had been relatively quiet for him. The scandal surrounding the beating of a teenager was gradually dying down. The settlement agreement had closed all issues, and tomorrow he would return to full patrol duty. Captain Wright had made it clear that the incident was considered closed, and that he just needed to be more careful with the use of force. Hansen took another sip of whiskey and changed the channel. The local news was showing a story about preparations for the city council elections. Boring politics that didn't interest him. He preferred simple things: work, drinking, and occasionally visiting his ex-wife for alimony. At 11:52 p.m., the doorbell rang. Hansen frowned and looked at his watch. Who could be coming at this hour? His neighbors didn't like him because of his noisy parties. He didn't have any close friends, and delivery services were no longer working. The doorbell rang again, insistently, for a long time. "Who's there?" Hansen shouted, heading for the door. There was no answer. He looked through the peephole, but the porch was poorly lit, and he couldn't make out the visitor. All he could see was a dark figure in a hood. "Officer Hansen?" came a muffled voice. "Yes. What is it?" "I need to tell you something important. About the Taylor case." Hansen frowned. The case was closed. What else could be needed? But curiosity got the better of him. He opened the door, leaving the chain on. "Who are you?" The figure on the porch stepped closer to the light. A young face was visible under the hood, but the features were difficult to make out in the darkness. "I'm a witness. I have information that may be of interest to you." "What information?" "Better to talk inside. It's delicate." Hansen hesitated. Something about this late-night visit made him wary, but the alcohol had dulled his instincts for self-preservation. He removed the chain and opened the door. "Come in, but quickly. I have to get up early for work tomorrow." The visitor entered the hallway without removing his hood. He was carrying a small backpack. "So what's this information?" Hansen asked, closing the door. Instead of answering, the visitor took a black object out of his backpack. In the dim light of the hallway, Hansen did not immediately realize that it was a gun. "What the hell?" The shot rang out at 11:56 p.m. Neighbors later said they heard a bang, but thought it was a tire bursting or a car door slamming. Shootings were rare in Fridley, and no one was alarmed. Hansen fell to the floor of the hallway, the bullet hitting him in the chest and piercing his heart. Death was instantaneous. The killer stood over the body for a few seconds, breathing heavily. Then he quickly surveyed the scene. No clues could be left behind. The shell casing was picked up, and the gun was already back in the backpack. The rain outside was getting heavier, which would help cover up the traces. The hooded figure left the house through the back door, disappearing into the darkness of the rainy night. Rick Hansen's body was discovered in the morning by his neighbor, Mrs. Eleanor Parker. The 70-year-old retiree brought the morning newspaper as usual. Hansen always asked her to pick up his mail when he was away. The front door was ajar, which seemed strange. Mrs. Parker looked inside and saw a man lying on the floor in a pool of blood. Her scream woke up half the neighborhood. The 911 call came in at 7:23 a.m. The first patrol car arrived 4 minutes later. Officers Michael Thornton and Jennifer Lopez. Thornton turned pale when he saw his colleague's body and immediately called for backup. "Dispatcher, 23rd Crew. We have a cop killed. We need detectives crime scene investigators, the whole circus. Address: 1247 Fillmore Street. Detective Sarah Morgan received the call at home while she was having breakfast before work. The message was brief and shocking. Officer Hansen has been killed. Your presence is required immediately. Morgan dropped her half-finished coffee and rushed to the scene. In her 20 years on the force, she had seen a lot, but the murder of a colleague was always particularly painful. Hansen's house was cordoned off with yellow tape, and a crowd of onlookers had gathered. 3 patrol cars, a forensic van, an ambulance, the standard setup for a murder scene. Morgan showed her badge to the officer at the entrance and went into the house. Hansen's body lay in the hallway, surrounded by forensic experts. A photographer was taking pictures from different angles, and a trace evidence expert was examining the floor and walls. "What do we have?" Morgan asked Sergeant Bill Connors, who was coordinating the work at the scene. "A single shot to the chest, large caliber. Time of death is around midnight, judging by the degree of rigor mortis. The door was open, but there are no signs of forced entry. So he let the killer in voluntarily? Looks like it. No signs of a struggle." Morgan carefully examined the scene. Hansen was lying face up, arms outstretched. The expression on his face showed complete surprise. He didn't even have time to be afraid. Was the weapon found? No. The killer took it with him. Any witnesses? The neighbor who found the body. She says she heard a bang last night but didn't think anything of it. No one else saw anything. Morgan walked into the living room. The TV was still on, and there was a half-empty bottle of whiskey on the table. It had been a normal evening for a lonely man, one that had suddenly turned into his last. "Did you check the alcohol?" she asked. "Yes, it's clean. No foreign substances." Captain David Wright arrived at the scene at 8:30. The murder of a police officer was an extraordinary event that required personal supervision by management. Wright looked shaken. Despite all his problems with Hansen, he was his subordinate. "Morgan, I need the results as soon as possible. The murder of a cop cannot remain unsolved." "I understand, sir. But we need time for the forensic examination." "We don't have time. The media is already involved, and the mayor is calling every half hour." Morgan nodded. Political pressure was inevitable, but it should not affect the course of the investigation. By 10 in the morning, the news of Officer Hansen's murder had spread throughout Fridley. The local radio station interrupted its music program with an emergency announcement, and television crews set up mobile stations near the victim's home. The town's reaction was mixed. For many, Hansen was a symbol of police brutality after the beating of Jason Taylor. Some expressed their condolences to his family and colleagues, while others openly said that he got what he deserved. A real war of opinions broke out on social media. The hashtag #HansenMurder quickly became a trend, but the comments were polar opposites. "Justice has prevailed," wrote one user. "No one deserves to die, not even a bad cop," argued another. The atmosphere at the police station was one of shock and anger. Officers gathered in groups discussing what had happened in hushed tones. Many demanded tough measures to catch the killer. Brad Cole, Hansen's former partner, was particularly shaken. Despite all the controversy surrounding the Taylor incident, Hansen remained his colleague and, to some extent, his friend. "Who could have done this?" he asked Detective Morgan. "There are many possibilities. Revenge for the beating of Taylor, personal motives, a random robbery." "Robbery? Nothing was stolen. Maybe the killer got scared and ran away without taking anything of value." But Morgan herself did not believe in the robbery theory. The murder was too deliberate, too professional for a random crime. By lunchtime, the first results of the forensic examination began to arrive at the station. The bullet was fired from a .38 caliber pistol, a weapon popular among civilians. No fingerprints were found at the crime scene, except for Hansen's and his neighbors. "The killer wore gloves," said forensic expert Dave Miller. "Professional, no mistakes." Morgan frowned. This indicated that the killer was prepared, which ruled out the possibility of a spontaneous crime. The first theory they began to work on was revenge for the beating of Jason Taylor. The list of suspects included Jason himself, his relatives, family friends, and activists who opposed police brutality. Let's start with the Taylor family, Morgan decided. They have the most obvious motive. But when she checked their alibis, the picture was unclear. Jason was at home with his mother, watching a movie until midnight. Neighbors confirmed that their car had been parked in the driveway all night. Linda Taylor was genuinely shocked by the news of the murder. "I didn't want him dead," she cried in conversation with the detective. "Yes, he hurt my son, but murder is too much." Jason was more reserved. "I won't say I feel sorry for him, but I didn't kill him." Morgan believed them. The mother and son were clearly not capable of cold-blooded murder. Next in line was the Clark family. The district attorney had access to a weapon and a motive, protecting his daughter's reputation. But Robert Clark was at a conference in Minneapolis at the time of the murder, as confirmed by hotel records. The other theories also yielded no results. Hansen had no serious enemies in the criminal world, no debts, and his personal life was empty after his divorce. By Wednesday evening, Morgan was feeling frustrated. The murder appeared to be professionally planned, but the motive remained unclear. "Maybe it's someone from our side," suggested Sergeant Connors. "A cop who got tired of covering for Hansen?" Morgan shook her head. "Too risky. And why kill him after the case had already been hushed up?" On Thursday morning, the results of a more detailed examination came in. Analysis of the evidence showed that the killer was short. The bullet trajectory indicated a shooter between 5 feet 3 inches and 5 feet 7 inches tall. This ruled out most male suspects. A woman, Connors wondered. Or a teenager, Morgan added. The new theory opened up additional possibilities. Perhaps the killer was the wife or girlfriend of one of Hansen's victims, or an activist seeking revenge for all the victims of police brutality. The list of suspects had to be reviewed. Meanwhile, the city was on edge. The murder of a police officer shook the quiet life of Fridley. People locked their doors with extra locks and avoided going out after dark. Police patrols were increased, but that did little to reassure anyone. If they can kill a cop, what about ordinary citizens? Such conversations could be heard in shops and cafes. Fridley Mayor James Anderson called an emergency press conference, promising a quick resolution of the crime and increased security in the city. But journalists asked uncomfortable questions about the connection between the murder and the Taylor case. "Do you think the murder was an act of revenge for the beating of the teenager?" asked a reporter from a local newspaper. "We are considering all possible versions," the mayor replied evasively. But everyone understood that this version was the main one. By the end of the week, the investigation had reached a dead end. Despite all efforts, no specific suspect could be identified. The killer seemed to have vanished into thin air, leaving no significant clues. Morgan sat in her office, studying the case files. Somewhere, an important detail had been overlooked, some connection that could lead to the solution. The answer was somewhere close, but it remained elusive. The breakthrough in the case came in the second week of the investigation, when Detective Morgan decided to take a closer look at the Taylor family's surroundings. While reviewing surveillance footage from the hospital during Jason's treatment, she noticed frequent visits from a young girl. Madison Clark, the prosecutor's daughter, said the technician who had studied the recordings. She came every day after school. Morgan frowned. The daughter of the prosecutor handling the assault case? This needed to be checked out. After reviewing school records, the detective discovered that Madison had been dating Jason Taylor for 8 months. The girl was an honor student, planning to study law, and had never been in trouble with the law. She seemed like the perfect candidate, someone no one would suspect. "Too perfect," Morgan muttered, making notes in her notebook. Checking her alibi revealed an interesting detail. On the night of the murder, Madison was supposedly at home, preparing for exams. But her neighbors didn't see any light in her window after 11 p.m., even though she usually studied until midnight. Morgan decided to talk to Madison's parents informally. Robert Clark received her in his office, looking tense. "Detective, I hope you understand the sensitivity of the situation. My daughter is upset about what happened to her boyfriend." "Of course, sir. Just a routine check. Where was Madison on the night of the murder?" "At home, preparing for college. My wife can confirm that." But when Morgan spoke to Mrs. Clark separately, she admitted that she had gone to bed early and had not checked on her daughter after 10 p.m. Madison is very independent. She could have been up studying until morning, and I wouldn't have known. The next step was to check the gun safe in the Clark home. Officially, a warrant was required, but the prosecutor couldn't refuse to cooperate without arousing suspicion. A ballistics expert examined Robert Clark's service weapon, a .40 caliber Glock 22 pistol. But there was also an old .38 caliber Smith & Wesson in the safe, the same caliber that killed Hansen. "When was the last time you checked this gun?" Morgan asked. Clark thought for a moment. "At least 2 months ago. Why?" "Could you check it now?" Robert opened the safe and took out the revolver. With an experienced movement, he checked the cylinder and turned pale. "One bullet is missing." Morgan felt her pulse quicken. "Who else knows the code to the safe?" "Only my wife and daughter." That same day, Morgan received the results of the analysis of the traces from the crime scene. Microscopic fibers of dark blue fabric were found in Hansen's house, from Fridley's high school uniform. In addition, a camera at a gas station near Hansen's house recorded a suspicious figure around midnight, a person in dark clothing and a hood walking toward the victim's house. The quality of the recording was poor, but experts were able to determine the approximate height, 165 centimeters, Madison Clark's height. "I need to talk to the girl," Morgan told Captain Wright. "Be careful. Her father is an influential man." "I understand, sir." Morgan met Madison at school after class. The 18-year-old girl looked calm, but the detective noticed the tension in her posture. "Madison, I'm investigating the murder of Officer Hansen. I need to clarify a few details." "Of course, although I don't understand how I can help." "Did you know Officer Hansen?" Madison paused for a second. "He's the one who beat up Jason." "How did you feel about him?" "Hate," the girl replied without hesitation. "He disfigured the man I love and got away with it." Morgan noted the sincerity of the answer. "Where were you on Tuesday night, the night of the murder?" "At home. Studying for exams. Who can confirm that?" "My parents." "But your mother says she went to bed early." Madison paled slightly. "I was at home." All evening, Morgan took out a photo from the gas station camera. "Do you recognize this figure?" The girl looked at the blurry image and shook her head. "It could be anyone. You're 5 feet 5 inches, just like the person in the photo." "Detective, are you accusing me of murder?" "I'm just asking questions for now." Madison stood up. "Then I want to talk to a lawyer, and my father." Over the next 2 days, Morgan gathered additional evidence. A check of Madison's cell phone showed that she had searched the internet for information about Hansen, his address, daily schedule, personal details. In addition, her search history included queries about ballistics, bullet trajectories, and ways to avoid leaving fingerprints. She was preparing, Morgan told the prosecutor. She studied the victim and planned the murder. Robert Clark sat in his office, looking 10 years older. His career, reputation, and family were falling apart before his eyes. "Are you sure it was Madison?" "The evidence points to her." Motive, opportunity, circumstantial evidence, but no direct evidence? There's the missing bullet from your safe, traces of the school uniform, the gas station camera. That's enough for an arrest. On Thursday morning, 2 patrol cars and a detective's car pulled up to the Clark's house. Madison met them on the porch, already dressed and ready. "Madison Clark, you are under arrest on suspicion of the murder of Officer Rick Hansen. Morgan said in an official tone. The girl held out her hands for the handcuffs. I understand. Robert Clark stood in the doorway, watching his daughter being led away. His wife cried on his shoulder. At the station, Madison held herself with dignity. Her lawyer advised her to remain silent, but she unexpectedly asked to speak to the detective alone. I want to tell the truth, she said calmly. Madison, you shouldn't, the lawyer began. No, enough lies. Morgan turned on the tape recorder. Tell me what happened on the night of the murder. Madison leaned back in her chair and closed her eyes. I couldn't accept the injustice. Hansen mutilated Jason and got away with it. The system I had believed in my whole life had betrayed us. And you decided to take revenge? I decided to restore justice. If the law can't punish the guilty, then someone has to do it. How did you plan the murder? I spent 2 weeks studying his routine. I found out that he lived alone and drank in the evenings. I took a gun from my father's safe. I had known the code since childhood. Madison recounted the details. How she arrived at Hansen's house, introduced herself as a witness, how he let her in, and how she shot him. What were you thinking at that moment? About Jason in his hospital bed. About justice finally prevailing. Do you regret what you did? Madison was silent for a long time. I regret that it had to come to this. But Hansen got what he deserved. The confession was recorded on video and signed in the presence of a lawyer. Madison Clark was officially charged with first-degree murder. The news of the prosecutor's daughter's confession shook the city. The media talked about childish justice, the revenge of a straight-A student, and the collapse of a politician's family. Jason Taylor learned of Madison's arrest from his mother. He sat in their modest kitchen, staring at the wall. She killed him because of me, he whispered. She made her choice, son. But I didn't ask her to do it. I wanted to forget and move on. Linda hugged her son. Their family had also fallen victim to this tragedy. Madison Clark's trial took place 6 months later. The girl was found guilty of second-degree murder. The jury took her age and motives into account. The sentence was 25 years in prison with the possibility of parole after 15 years. Robert Clark resigned as district attorney and left town with his wife. His political career was ruined forever. Jason Taylor never recovered from what had happened. The injuries he received from Hansen and his guilt over Madison's fate broke him. He dropped out of school, started drinking, and a year later was sent to prison for theft. Detective Sarah Morgan was promoted for solving the high-profile case, but she felt no satisfaction. Too many lives had been destroyed by a single act of police brutality. Fridley gradually returned to normal life, but the scars remained. The city learned a painful lesson that justice and revenge are two different things, and that sometimes the price of truth is too high. In prison, Madison Clark studied law by correspondence, preparing to become a lawyer after her release. She still believed she had done the right thing, even though she understood the price of her decision. Justice had prevailed, but there were no winners in this story.